Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Priceless podcast. This podcast is made in partnership with the European Forum of LGBT Christian Groups. If you would like to make a donation to the European Forum or the Priceless podcast, or you can donate to both, you can find the necessary links in the podcast description, as well as all other links that might come up during the conversation and interview with my next guest. And my new guest today is Shanon Ferguson from England, and they're going to tell us a little bit more about themselves. But what I can say is that they were a pastor of MCC North London, if I'm not mistaken. So welcome, Shanon. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, and very pleased to be here talking with you today, Mihail.
Well, I'm very pleased too, and thank you for accepting this invitation. So our viewers and listeners might not know much about you, so could you say a few words? How would you like them to know you?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, as you've already said, I'm Reverend Shanon Eli Ferguson, and I was the senior pastor at the Metropolitan Community Church of North London for about 8 years, but I was an assistant pastor there prior to that, and actually did most of my training for ordination at that church. So I actually have a long history with MCC North London. In case people don't know what MCC is, because not everybody may have come across it, it's actually the UFMCC, United Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, and it's a denomination that was started up by a gay priest who got to the point of suicide because he was constantly being evicted from his churches when they discovered his sexuality. And he realized in that moment that God loves all God's children, and felt a strong calling to start a gathering for people who were LGBT and Christian. So he started off with 12 people in his front room, and it grew. That was in 1967, and it has grown from there. And we are now in most countries across the world, and it's now a fully fledged denomination. And in the UK, we have 9 churches currently, and also some in Scotland. So I shouldn't have said UK, because Scotland is part of UK. But anyway, in England, we don't have anything in Wales. So in England, in England and in Scotland, that's the church that I became ordained in, because I've always known God. So many people talk to me about, having these wonderful experiences where they feel they've been born again. And I can't say I've ever had that type of experience, that type of encounter with God, because my mother used to get really cross with me because I'd keep nagging her about going to church, and she wasn't a churchgoer, and she couldn't understand, and didn't till the day she died, could not understand my relationship with God at all. But God has just always been there. That's really all I can say. But of course, I've had times when I've felt closer to God than others. There's certainly been times when God's tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Oi, you, get back over here. You're going the wrong way." and certainly with my decision to be ordained, that was very much a very personal encounter with God. So it was quite strange. I didn't. I've sort of had a couple of different journeys with regards to my sexuality and with regards to my gender. Perhaps I should start off by saying that I currently identify as non-binary trans-masculine. And the reason I use that description is that I was assigned female at birth, but have always been very strongly connected with a more masculine side to who I am. And I didn't have any words when I was young. You didn't even know about transgender. Yeah. It wasn't until probably I was about in my early teens that the first person appeared on the news that was transgender. And it certainly wasn't something that would have been part of my life, my family circle. This would not have been something which would have been talked about or would have been relevant in any way. And so... Yeah, you know, there just wasn't any words or anything for me to connect anything to. I just knew that I never fitted in with girls. I never had girlfriends to play with or whatever. I was always awkward with them. I didn't know how to relate to them. I was always far more comfortable being with the boys. And of course, I put that down to the fact that I only had brothers, so I didn't have any experience of connecting with girls. You know, yeah. There was always reasons, always excuses, all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I just got on with it, you know, and I just followed what society expected. And I found some men attractive, but I always knew that I couldn't live with one. I couldn't marry one. But again, I just thought, it's because I haven't met Mr. Right. You know, this is, there was always these things. And so it wasn't until I was 23 that I realized that actually I was attracted to the feminine. And so started to explore what that meant. And so from the age of 23, I took on the label of lesbian, because this is the label that closely fitted. It was the nearest I got to something, and it certainly made me feel more at home, more that I had a place, having never felt that I fitted in. I really envy those people who have made friends in their high school years, who they've carried through their lives with them, because I could never do that, because I could just not connect with people. And so I started to find a group of people that I felt I had something in common with, and this was really nice, but it never quite fitted. It was never quite right. But I sort of did that for 35 odd years, with having that label. And it was only around 10 or so years ago that I started realizing that actually it wasn't so much to do with my sexuality as it was to do with my gender. And started to really look at how I was presenting with regards to being more masculine, how I understood myself in those ways, and I started to put the pieces together, and seeing how silly little things were all sort of pointers to the fact that I came under the trans umbrella. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose touch with my feminine side either. I had lived as a female for so many years. I had so much experience that I can't ignore, I can't dismiss, and I don't want to. And that is why non-binary is a much better fit for me. And so when this language started to appear, it was just fabulous for me, because I thought, yes, this describes who I am so much more clearly. But having then found something which fitted my gender, it then threw up in the air, well, what about my sexuality? Because if I'm trans, then I can't be a lesbian. But I'm certainly not straight. So I love the word queer. Because for me, queer is something that can't be put into a box. It can't be labelled. There's something a bit different about it. So it's a bit strange. It's a bit peculiar. It just doesn't fit nice and neatly into boxes. And that's me. I don't fit nice and neatly into little boxes. And so I know that I am attracted to the feminine, but the feminine can come in any package. That isn't the important thing. But as I don't identify within a binary gender, I can't identify with a binary sexuality. And to be lesbian or to be a gay man, you have to have a binary a binary gender. And bisexual doesn't quite fit, because again, it really is linked to the binary. So that's why I tend to say that I'm non-binary trans-masculine with an attraction to the feminine. Bit of a mouthful, or for short, queer.
You're a rainbow by yourself, you know.
Absolutely, I can tick all the boxes for equality that you like, because I'm an older person. I'm a person with a disability. Obviously, I have many years' experience of being a lesbian. I have many years' experience of being a woman, and so I'm trans. I could do the equalities all on my own. It's crazy. But the one wonderful thing in all of that is that my relationship with God never wavered. I didn't for 1 second think that God wouldn't love me anymore, or that there was a barrier between myself and God. That did not change at all. I was very aware that my sexuality was an issue for some churches. And I was a Baptist. As I say, my family didn't go to church. I was christened as a baby in the Church of England because that's what you did. And my mother went to church. What I like to say is hatchings, matchings and dispatchings. So for christenings, for marriages and for funerals. And that was it. So I had the opportunity to choose my own denomination, what worked for me. And I found that I was very comfortable within the Baptist Church and their beliefs. But there was obviously the issue then with my sexuality. So I did have many years where I church hopped. Having had a community that I'd belonged to for many years and been very active in, I just started going to different churches. Often used the excuse of I went to wherever, whatever service fitted in with my work schedule and this sort of thing. But it was always really a case of not staying long enough for the awkward questions to be asked. Partly because I didn't want to put other people in that position of then having to, oh dear, you can't actually help us in the Sunday school because it's against our policies. Or no, actually no, you can't become a member after all. So I didn't want to put, if I had built a relationship with somebody in a church, I didn't want to then put them in that position. And I didn't want to put myself in that position either. So I never stayed long enough. And it was only when I eventually moved into southeast London that I heard about, because I actually was looking for a church that I could go to. And I heard about the Metropolitan Community Church, about this church that was set up with a ministry to the LGBT community. And there was one not very far from me, so I decided to pop along one day. I must admit, part of me was thinking, it's probably not a real church, but, we'll go and see. And it was just wonderful. When I walked through the door, it was very much that I had come home, that this was a place where I could bring all of me. That I didn't have to leave anything at the door. I didn't have to be careful about what I said and who I said it to. I could just be me. And so it wasn't very long into my attending that church that I felt the call to ordination. But unlike a lot of people who I know have really struggled with their gender or their sexuality and their faith, that has never been something that I've had to go through. There have been many other challenges, but I'm pleased to say that isn't something. My relationship with God has never ever wavered.
You said, you talked about your process of first coming out as a lesbian and then realizing, coming to terms with non-binary or hearing that something like this exists. How was it for you to go through all these different processes? Because, for many of us, it's one process. At one time we realize, I realized I'm gay, but you have all these different steps that you took. How is that for you?
Yeah. I'm a very pragmatic person. So I will just get on with whatever is in front of me, whatever needs to be done, I will do it. I'm wonderful in a crisis because I don't flap. There's blood gushing out of you. Fine, we need to stop it. Let's get on with that. Do you know what I mean? That's the sort of person I am. So, suddenly realizing that I'm sexually attracted to women. Okay, I'm sexually attracted to women. That's I now go to a different nightclub. Big deal. Yeah. But I think the thing that was always the issue for me was managing the relationships, because whilst there wasn't an issue in it for myself, I was very aware that there was issues for other people. So how were certain friends going to react? I've already talked about being careful around church communities. How what would I say to family? Do I say anything? How is it going to affect all of those relationships? And so it was very much about the people around me and the process of helping them through the coming out. Because I think we sometimes forget that it's not just us that come out, but every time my mother would talk about me to a friend, the likelihood is that she would have to come out again as the mother of a lesbian or whatever. So these these decisions that I make about who I am do have an impact on other people. And maybe again it's just me, because I like to make sure that everything's organized and good and all the rest of it. I was always very aware of what that impact was going to be on other people, and trying to manage that in the best way that I could. And I think the coming out as gay wasn't such a big issue. I didn't live anywhere near my family, so they didn't really know anything about my life. So I didn't ever feel the need to make any big reveal. The only person I was close to was one of my brothers, and they knew from the start. The people I worked with knew. I mean, they actually walked with me through my coming out, through my working out. That I was attracted to women. So that from that point of view, everything was quite easy. I think it's been more difficult in the process of understanding my gender. And I think some of that is to do with also the physical changes that I have chosen to make in order to become more who I am. So the decision to start taking testosterone, which would masculinize some of my features, little moustache growing, the hair's receding a bit more than it was previously. I can no longer sing soprano. Yes, yes. I'm afraid the soprano has gone completely. This has an impact on other people. And then, of course, in January, I had top surgery. And that for me was the most wonderful thing I have ever done. And, part of me wishes that I had done it years ago. But I'm also not a person that sits there and thinks, oh, if only, because the day after the surgery, I looked in the mirror and it was like, oh, there you are. I knew you were there somewhere. But again, even though I haven't changed as a person in my personality, how I present to the world has changed. And again, this has obviously an impact on other people. People who've had a relationship with me as a woman, as a lesbian, are now having to change that relationship. They're having to change how they talk about me and to me, changing the pronouns that they use for me, or other nouns. I'm now an uncle, not an auntie. All my great nephews are absolutely fantastic. None of them have had any difficulties with it at all. It was like, yeah, okay. And now they correct their parents and things if they get it wrong, if they forget. But there are some people, obviously, who've known me for 40 odd years or whatever, who struggle with it. And that can be difficult because there's obviously this very strong sense for me that as you are somebody who is very close to me and who claims to love me, surely you should be making a huge effort to respect who I am and use the correct pronouns and things. But then on the other side, of course, they've also had 40 odd years of using a different pronoun, which is completely rooted in their brain. And so it's not easy to change them because everything's on autopilot, and you should. And so I have to accept that difficulty, but at the same time, it can be very painful when people you love constantly misgender you and use the wrong words and things when you've repeatedly asked them to use something different, having had relationships with women, and I have been having relationships with women throughout my transition. I'm very aware that it can be difficult for them too, because they entered into a relationship believing they were having a lesbian relationship with a woman, even though from the start I had talked about my gender and what my plans were. Talking about it is one thing; actually living through it is another. So I'm very aware that they're having to now look at that relationship. Is this a relationship that they want? How invested are they in their label of being a lesbian? Does being in a relationship with me change the fact that they're a lesbian in any way? Or bisexual, or whatever label the person holds. It can be very difficult at times because we love labels, and when you rip a label off and stick something else on, it has a ripple effect, it can impact on so many people. And I think that's something which we don't always, or we're not always fully aware of or take into consideration, when we make our big proclamations or go through those changes.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting point that you made with, people just having a difficulty adjusting to changing your pronouns. My question is, do you maybe have a suggestion? One thing that I realize that what happens to people, one thing is that our brains, unfortunately, are very lazy. That's one very interesting fact that I heard. The older we get, the lazier it gets. And we like just to have, the things that we are used to. And it's just easier for our brain to function in what you said, auto mode. So the question is, if we take this into account, but also your pain and the danger that people will just, when things get too difficult, the first thing that people do is they just get more distant, because, again, we are lazy. So do you have any suggestions what people can do, especially on the side, who are friends with someone who is trans, who is transitioning, who is changing, what they can do, but also maybe a suggestion for other trans people who are planning to transition or come out as trans? What would you say? I mean, it's also a big question, of course, again.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for people who are not trans, who are friends, consider themselves allies, whatever label the person holds, I would say the biggest thing that you can do is to respect the other person and to listen to them and try to use the terminology that they have asked you to use with regards to them and their situation. And that can be different for every trans person. So again, don't make assumptions. Because one person has asked you to do things in a certain way, don't assume that is how another trans person will want you to do things as well. Don't be afraid to ask the person how they wish to be addressed, or what terms they would like you to use, and don't be afraid of being questioned around what you say. Language is a very strange thing, and again, we are lazy in how we use language, and so often we can say something and mean one thing, but how another person hears it, they take a very different meaning, and therefore can be offended by it. For example, there was a conversation in a group that I'm part of only yesterday, where somebody used the phrase trans issues. Now, what they meant were the issues that trans people face because of society's lack of understanding or the church's lack of understanding, etc. What one person heard was that trans people are an issue. And so was very upset by this term. Fortunately, they had a very polite exchange and got to a point of understanding one another. But it's very easy. So don't, when somebody has gone through a painful period or is still going through a painful period, because they are working through both their self-understanding and how to be in a world in a new way, taking on board all the oppression and discrimination that society piles on, maybe struggling with reconciling their faith and all the Bible teachings that they have had over the years with who they know themselves to be. They can sometimes not have the patience to be polite when they hear something that just adds to that, because again, it might not be what you have said per se, but the fact that that's the last straw, and so be aware of that, and don't let it faze you. Just let the person explain, and then quietly explain what your intention was, and take on board if you've got it wrong, and try to do it differently next time. It's a learning process for all of us, and I think we just have to be patient and respectful of one another, so that we can move forward in a harmonious manner. For the trans person, again, it's pretty much sort of the opposite. Be aware that you're sensitive because of everything that's going on, and that what a person is saying or doing might not be intended to be offensive. And so just take a breath and don't be afraid to challenge the person, but challenge the person in a respectful manner, in the same way as you would want to be addressed. And I think, try not to be afraid of who you are. God is incredibly imaginative and creative, and doesn't make only one or only two of anything. You've only got to look around this world. I have trees in my garden. No two are the same. There's a myriad of different variations. And it's the same with people, and it's the same with gender, and it's the same with sexuality. There is no one right way of being a tree, and there is no one right way of being a person. And we're never fully ourselves. It's a process that we go through our whole lives. It's a becoming, and we will only actually become when we are back with God. Until that point, we will still be becoming who we are meant to be, who God created us to be. So don't think you've ever done it. I'm sorry to tell you, Mihail, coming out as gay, that was not it. You will have to go through many, many more processes as you understand who you are as a gay man. And what that means and how that defines your relationships and changes things. So it's never a momentary thing. Everything is a process, whether it's in our faith lives or our gender lives or our sexuality lives. So we have to learn, and we have to also remember that it may have taken us years to get to a point of understanding. And so in the moment that we tell someone else, we shouldn't expect them to have that understanding just because we've told them. They haven't had the benefit of all the years of deliberation that we have gone through to get to that point. So give them time to catch up.
Yeah. And I would here maybe take the image of, the difference, even though I have an experience of coming out, not just one, but many experiences of coming out. But then again, coming out as trans is again different. And even though we have some similarities, at the same time, it's very different. It's hard for me to understand how it is to come out as a trans person. But all I can do is listen. So, for straight people who never had to come out, it's even more difficult to understand what we are doing and coming to terms with understanding why and
I think also we have to remember that homosexuality has been talked about and been visible for 70 odd years now. Okay, I mean, it's been around the whole of the time that human beings have been around. But with regards to the way things have evolved more recently, it's certainly been something that has been more talked about, more known about, and we've gone through that process of greater acceptance of there being a variety of ways to express one's sexuality. We haven't had that same period of time when it comes to understanding that gender may also be on a spectrum and not a binary. And we're everything about society is very strongly fixed on the binary of male and female. As soon as somebody declares that they are having a baby, the very first thing anybody asks is, do you know the gender? And the very first thing that is pronounced when the baby is born is, it's a girl or it's a boy. People are knitting pink or blue baby items before the baby's even born. We see it everywhere, this division of gender. So there is now some greater acceptance for people who transition across the binary, because then they are fitting neatly into that little box of male or female. But for those people who are, like myself, finding that those boxes really do not work, this confuses people. It's much more difficult for people to get their head around that because they have spent their whole lives from before they were even born in being indoctrinated in the fact that gender is a binary. You are either male or you are female, and that's all there is to it. So it is much harder to try and get people to understand that, to actually shift on that. I think even people who are very definite about their sexuality, that they are straight, would probably, if challenged, have to admit that, yeah, they had a close friend, or yeah, they did think that was attractive in somebody of the same gender or whatever. So there is some sort of understanding, some experience of being able to be attracted to somebody of the same gender. So it's easier to understand that people may have a different sexuality. But because of how indoctrinated we are with binary gender, it's far more difficult for people to understand that that gender isn't quite so fixed. And any anomalies from the binary gender have been hidden from the world. Intersex babies have had surgery done on them to make them fit into the gender binary, because it just was not acceptable for somebody to not be either male or female, to not be within that binary. So it wasn't talked about. Even the child themselves were never told. And the doctors would tell the parents, don't tell the child, don't talk about it. You just bring that child up in this gender. End of story. And so, it is much more difficult to get people to understand about being trans and being non-binary.
Yeah. Can you tell me and, of course, the audience a little bit about what it entitles, what happens, especially within a person that is trans and starts transitioning? What it takes for this person to get out into the world because of this visible change. Yeah.
I mean, I can only talk about my own personal experience because I think it's different for everyone. But one of the issues is the pressure that is often put to what we call pass. So, again, to fit into a binary gender. And this is something that I wouldn't say I've struggled with, but I've had to make compromises, uncomfortable compromises around who I am, because of the pressure to be within a binary. I started taking testosterone over 2 years ago. So, as I say, the masculinization had started, and I could have had a moustache like I do now many, many months ago. But I felt compelled, as much as I liked it and wanted to keep it, I felt compelled to shave because of the fact that I was large-breasted. It was too confusing for people for me to walk around with a moustache and a pair of large breasts, because the breast made them say, "Oh, you're female," and then all of a sudden they see this moustache and they think, "Well, that's male." So I used to shave, and I didn't like it. It was a real struggle for me to do that. And part of the reason that I did was because I care for my 2 adopted brothers who have learning disabilities. And I normally have them with me because they can't be left unattended. I didn't want to have difficult situations with the general public when I had to consider my caring role for them. But I do feel that we shouldn't be put in that position. But the pressure is very, very strong to either look male or to look female. And now, even though I understand myself as non-binary, and I had for many years said that I wouldn't change my gender marker until I could have a non-binary marker, because changing it to male isn't any more accurate than having it as female. I have changed it on my passport now and on my driving license, because of the fact that the photos on these, when somebody looks at it, they are going to make the assumption that I am male. Again, going through customs with two people with disabilities, I don't want to be stopped and taken off to a little room to be challenged about, this isn't right. Or when I go through the machine and the X-ray they take of me tells them that I'm not male. There are these issues. So up until January, I had kept a female passport, but I changed that to male because I do not look female anymore, and so I'm having to make these compromises about who I am. In order to satisfy the general public. It's really amusing, because I was on holiday last week with my brothers, and we were in Cardiff on this campsite, and of course I'm sitting outside doing what anybody who knows me knows I'm always doing. I was knitting, and so people are walking past and seeing this man knitting. And it was so funny. I was just watching the expressions of people as they walked past me. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to see, and I love that, because to me that's what it's about, being queer. It's about challenging those boxes. But as I say, there are times when you can't, because it's not safe to do so. And I know for many of my colleagues in other countries, it isn't safe for them to do that, to challenge the binary, and to not pass. So in those early days, before hormones are making a difference, or before you're able to have any surgeries, if that's what the route that you feel you want to take, it can be really, really difficult to live as who you know yourself to be, because you don't pass sufficiently to be accepted into a binary society.
Yeah. And I guess I'm hearing you're having fun with sometimes, just kind of teasing the public with, making them a little bit confused about their assumptions. But at the same time, it's not always easy to be a political statement and to be in this position to challenge people, because sometimes I guess you too just want to be Shanon and just live your life and not be looked at or questioned or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been an activist all my life, whether that was activism for the deaf or disabled, or for the last 20 odd years or more around gender and sexuality. So it is part of my nature to challenge society, I guess. I mean, that's why I worked for the lesbian and gay Christian movement as the chief exec for many years, because that gave me the opportunity to obviously challenge people around those very topics that are dear to my heart, around my faith and my gender and sexuality. I had the great opportunity to be very heavily involved in bringing about the marriage equality in the UK during that time. So that was a really exciting time for me. But the other thing, though, that during my time of working in that organisation was the the oppression and discrimination that actually goes on within the LGBT community as well, towards transgender and bisexual people. I mean, the organization itself started off as the gay Christian movement and was heavily just male-dominated. Yeah. It took 10 years before they put in the word lesbian, and then became the lesbian and gay Christian movement. But there was never any mention of bisexual or transgender people, and yet it was supposedly an LGBT organization. Yeah. And that is something that I find difficult, and that I challenge a lot these days, is any organization or conference or anything that says it's LGBT, and then there is nothing going on for bisexual or transgender people. And I think that's something that we need to work on, and especially within Christian organizations. Because Christianity is all about equality and inclusion. That's what Jesus was all about from the word go. And so if we're going to truly live our faith, then we need to make sure that LGBT Christian organizations really are there for all people. And that we are putting focus on the issues for bisexuals and the issues for trans and non-binary people, and not just looking at lesbian and gay issues. And so that was something as well that I worked on at LGCM, the Lesbian and Gay Christian Movement, was making sure that bisexual and trans people knew that they had a place at the table within that organization, even if the name didn't mention it. And I did the same as one of the co-presidents of the European Forum, was trying to raise the profile of bisexual and trans people within that organization. And I do think it's important that we support one another and we learn what it means to be under those different labels. And not just make the assumptions that, you're covered, it's there in the name. You're bisexual, well, that's fine, because if you're having a relationship with the same gender person, well, then, you can just go into the lesbian box or the gay male box. No, that's not good enough. It's not the same. It's a different experience. Yes, some trans people may identify as lesbian or gay, but some may not. Yeah. It's a very different thing. And so, we need to be aware of the diversity within our own group, if you like, and be prepared to learn and to work to make sure that our organizations are a safe space for all.
When you look at LGBT organizations and having the T at the end, of course, bisexuality was also very discriminated by LG. But let's focus on the T, because B is still sexuality, but of course it's a non-binary sexuality, so it got discriminated. But do you think that having the T in there with all these organizations not really being aware of how they should maybe include more trans people, do you think it did more harm, or was it a help for trans people?
Again, there's always been a lot of discussion about this. At one point, it was about, should organisations actually say they're LGB and T, to distinguish that T is different from LGB, because as you rightly say, LGB is around sexuality, T is around gender. But some trans people were not comfortable with being connected with LGB, especially if they were now living in their true gender and living as a straight person.
Yes.
They didn't feel any connection then to be with an LGBT organization. Again, the diversity within the trans community is immense. And so, for some people, it was not a place to be. They weren't interested in it. Some wanted that distinction, to that slight separation. Some saw no benefit of being connected, while others did. And I would say I come into the group of thinking that yes, it is right for T to be included in the LGBT. Because we are all very small minority groups, and if we all try and fight separately, we can end up competing against each other. Whereas if we actually work together, A, we become a larger minority, and B, we actually have more force behind us. We can share resources, and we can push for change together. I also think that whilst trans is about gender and the other's about sexuality, you can't have a sexuality without a gender. Okay, I'm going to say that again so it can sink in. You can't have a sexuality without a gender. You can only be gay if you know yourself to be male and you have an attraction for other people who identify as male. So they're not completely separated. And I think this is why for some bisexual people, they feel more connected to trans people than they do to the L and the G. Because even those who transition within the binary, they have still had to challenge that binary in that process. And certainly with non-binary people, bisexuals are much closer related. Their struggles are much closer related, because again, they are refusing to fit into one of the binary boxes. So there are similarities in our struggles that we can relate to. But there are differences between a lesbian struggle and a gay man's struggle. And there are differences between any two lesbians in their struggles. Do you know what I mean? So there is sufficient similarities for us to have a grounding to understand one another and to be able to work together. And I think the LGB people need to work on a better understanding of gender, because their sexuality is dependent upon it, and not to just take that for granted. And I think that would be helpful as well. And it isn't difficult to include things within conferences or within organizations that take into account different people's experiences. We do that all the time. It's no big thing. It's just we haven't done it, and so we now have to cross that line of yes, this is something that we do. This is one of the challenges that we face all the time in all sorts of areas of our lives, about just having to make that change from, this isn't something that we normally do, to this is something we normally do.
Do you think it is changing? Is it getting better?
Yes, I think it is. Again, I think there's been far more publicity around being trans and non-binary, whether that's because from good things or bad things, it's still publicity, and so it still provides education, and so I think people are more aware, and therefore it's easier then to take the next step of making those changes, because it's on people's radar. And I think as long as, again, it's done respectfully, lip service is not good enough. So, don't say you're an organization that works with a group of people if you're not actually working with them. Be honest. And if it's not something that your organization feels it can do, then drop the T. Don't, just be honest and say you're an LGV organization or even an LG organization. If you can't offer the same service to the other group or groups, then drop the labels. It's as simple as that. But don't give lip service. That helps no one.
Well, I'm looking at the time and
I can talk forever. You never have to pull answers out of me.
Yeah, so. This is great. This is a very new experience for me. I can see that you were a pastor. I didn't even have to ask that many questions.
I've also done a lot of television and radio interviews. So,
yes.
This is a natural format for me.
Great. Well, if you want to say a few words that you didn't have a chance to say, especially maybe to the youth who are thinking about transitioning or questioning their gender, what would you tell them?
I would just say that when God created you, they created you to be unique. And you have to find what that uniqueness is and what it is that God wants you to become, and then follow that journey. It's not a one-off thing. It is a journey. It's a constant becoming, and you need to just be honest with yourself and work with it. It will be difficult, but God will be walking beside you every step of the way. So be brave, take that step that you know you need to take, and be true to yourself and be true to God, and know that God is with you always.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this message. Thank you for everything that you shared with me, with us. It was so much vulnerability that I experienced in what you were saying and sharing, which is so meaningful for me, and I believe for the viewers, to even better understand and connect to what it means to be trans, or how you said, non-binary
trans-masculine with not a trans man,
trans-masculine.
Yeah, non-binary trans-masculine with an affection for the feminine.
Beautiful. So thank you so much for everything that you shared and for letting us to get a glimpse into your world. Dear viewers and listeners, all we can do is to continue learning about what we don't know, ask questions, be open to get to know new things, and not be afraid to say that we don't know or that we don't understand. That's fine. And it's much better and less harmful than saying that we do know, but actually we don't. So, thank you all for tuning in and for listening and watching. I hope I'll see you, you'll see me with my guests soon again. I'm inviting you to write your comments. We would like to hear what your experiences are, or maybe even some suggestions that you would have for the listeners and viewers. What would help you, or what helped you is even better. So please start commenting, because that will also help the podcast to get more towards the top, so more people would be able to see these podcasts, especially the people that need to see this podcast, that would find some support within their process wherever they're at. So see
Mihail,
you.
I would be happy to answer any questions if people post questions. If you forward them on to me, I'm very happy to answer them.
So you heard, if you have any questions for Shanon, please write them in the comments and I will forward them to Shanon and Shanon will answer them. And I will post back then the answer. So yeah, thank you all and see you in a week, I guess. Until then, I say bye to you, Shanon, and to all of you viewers. Bye.